And we're live.
Not quite. Well,
Yeah,
we
we're
are
live.
live, but we
Yes, we are. So live.
It's funny.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Bettina, thanks for coaching me through the channels.
Yes.
You're very welcome.
And guide you on your path and inspire your truest passions. She will encourage you to share your gifts and ignite your inner wisdom.
You're welcome.
So with a little humor and grace and her own soul fire passion, Kate talks with amazing guests who have embraced the pursuit and are fanning the flames of their own passion, purpose, and soul fire wisdom. Now here's your host, Kate.
welcome to this special broadcast of Soulfire Wisdom. Our broadcast today, our special panel discussion is on bias to bigotry, causes and solutions for moving forward. And unfortunately, we're starting a little late. This is the first time I had so many people on, and technology, did its thing. So I'm going to say to the speakers, mute your mics until I bring the whole group on again, because there's some squeaky noise. So I want to take just a minute to say, why I decided to do this panel, other than, our whole year of many different awarenesses. I guess my thought of having discussions on this started actually in 2019. And in 2019, when we were having all of those different shootings and a lot of things happening around the country that were kind of unsettling, I did something called a Soul Talk, which is a video blog that I do called Finding Calm in the Chaos. And during this Soul Talk, kind of unintentionally, the topic of race came up. And I was having the discussion with a fellow coach, Hallie Bourne, and we had a pretty in-depth discussion on race. But then afterwards, I thought, we're two older white ladies, and maybe we weren't really able to address the topic, as well as it should have been. And so I asked Doree, who is on the panel here, to do another Soul Talk with me. And that one was called Race in America. And the reason why I asked Doree to do that talk was because he's a millennial who grew up in Chicago, and he was a friend of my son, and he had mentioned the fear that he had about driving. Every time he got in the car, he mentioned that, he was pretty much terrified. And now afterwards, if you listen to the talk we had, it was kind of pretty much foretelling the situation with George Floyd. And then, everybody probably knows all the things that happened around race and bringing to light circumstances really around race. And when I look back, even on the talk that I had with Ree, I noticed that, I was born in North Dakota. My parents were from North Dakota, but I grew up in the Seattle suburbs, and I saw my parents who were, they did have a lot of racist ideas and were bigoted, but their feelings were based on ignorance and lack of exposure. So over my lifetime, I saw them change. So I think I had it in my head that that's how it always worked, that if you were tolerant and people were exposed to different races, then they would change. In the discussion with Doree, I realized that I was kind of maybe telling him that, he needed to be more tolerant. And then everything happened in 2020. And I thought, wait a minute, maybe we've been too tolerant, because I realized that it isn't just ignorance and lack of exposure. There's more to the issues with racism. And so, that's what led me to want to have this panel. And I want to say a couple more things and then I'll introduce them. One is that we have a diverse panel, but it doesn't represent the diversity of the country. It's just all that we could really fit in 2 hours and the number of spots that we can have on the panel. And the members in the panel, although they may be able to bring to light some views of different groups, they are representing themselves and not all the people in those racial or ethnic groups. So let's get started with our discussion, and I'm going to bring the rest of the group on now. Uh-oh. We seem to have lost a couple people here. What happened? Okay. Are you here, Doree? Are you here, Doree?
I'm here.
Are you here, Doree?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, who did we lose?
Hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. We lost somebody.
Bettina. We lost Bettina.
Hello, Michael.
I'm back.
Okay, where did Bettina go?
Are you guys here?
There she is.
Okay. So I think, is this Angela that's on Facebook that commented that she didn't get the link?
I believe so. Looks like it.
If it is Angela, I resent you the link in Messenger, so you can try that. It just says Facebook user. Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask the group is to go around and introduce yourselves and tell us why you decided to speak on the panel today. So we'll just start with Davina and go right through the panel.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I am Davina Lyons. I am the founder of Authentic Me, which is a community for women, and also Authentic Best Life, which is a community for young adults and teens. And it's about self-awareness and resilience. And so I do workshops monthly. In addition to that, I am also an eighth grade English language arts teacher. Very much so think this is an extremely important conversation. Happy to be a part of it, and looking forward to engaging.
Jim?
Hi, I'm Jim Kellner. I'm a hypnotist, motivational speaker. I wanted to participate in this because, boy, things are just so kind of crazy, and it seemed like they've just gotten worse over this last year. And of course, then we see I think so many incidents last year, like the George Floyd being, literally murdered right there on video in front of us. Something's got to be done. And so the more we talk about it, I'm just hoping that we can work through these kind of things. Thanks, Kate.
Enmei?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Enmei Mangles. I am an intuitive strategic advisor to really high performing individuals across the world. I am also a co-facilitator in an organization called Safe Place to Peace Bridges, in which we talk about the upsetting conditions of racism across our world. And I am honored to be here. I feel that this is my civic duty. Thank you.
Alex?
Good morning, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm extremely honored and blessed to be here. Excuse me, because I think there's a couple of different things that I can contribute. First of all, I'm a writer and a speaker based in San Diego. So coming out of Southern California, which is extremely diverse, but also being a border town, we have quite a bit of diversity challenges and just outright racism when it comes to our border communities. I actually was born in South America, in Colombia, so I have that perspective. Yet I am a Latino who is extremely light-skinned, and oftentimes I can evade the perils of racism just because of the fact that of my skin tone. So that gives a unique dynamic, I feel. And then on top of that, I have a physical disability, which I know isn't necessarily, germane to today's topic, but it kind of adds a different layer of perspective. So all of those things, I hope to be able to contribute to the conversation.
So we changed our configuration here. Melissa?
Hi there. I am Dr. Melissa Bird, and I am a coach and a public speaker. And I teach people how to harness their inner rebel to make a difference in their lives and their communities. I am Southern Paiute from Utah, and my ancestors come from the area near Las Vegas, St. George, and the North Rim of the Grand Canyon. I do workshops and facilitation in Christian communities to help people think about truth and reconciliation in the context of Jesus, racism, and social justice. And I sit on the Truth and Reconciliation Committee and the Committee to End Racism for the Episcopal Diocese of Oregon. So I am very happy to be here. Thank you.
Doree? Doree? Okay, We'll come back to Doreen.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Doreen?
Can I be heard? You hear me?
You are here.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Keep talking. Okay.
Okay, I'm Doree Arrington. Thank you, Kate, for having me on this show here. I think this is incredibly important.
Okay. Could we try this? Could everybody mute their mic except the person speaking? Uh-oh. Not you, Doree.
I think we lost him. Oh, there he comes.
Is there a way for him to dial in on a telephone as well for audio?
No. Oh, I don't know how that would work. Bettina?
Is he there? Sure thing.
No, just go ahead, Bettina, and introduce yourself. He's not there.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Bettina Carey, and I'm a Latina, and I'm born to Puerto Rican parents. And my father, very dark, my mother, very light skinned. And so I really grew up experiencing racism on some level. And so I'm really happy to be here to talk a little bit about my story and how, it might impact my future and everybody's future and what I can contribute. And I'm all about empowering women, men, boys, and girls. And I help folks to shatter their glass ceilings, to kick their self-imposed limitations to the curb, and to live their legacies now. And I'm just excited about speaking today about this very important topic. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Kate. Thank you.
Michael?
Hello, everyone. Michael Loden here from Final Step International, and I too am a coach and a former probation officer in the LA County area. And for 20 years, and I'm in South LA, and I've seen the pipeline, and I've dealt with black males for the most part, and wrote a book on that. And why I'm here is to hear everybody's perspective, something I may be missing, and to learn something from someone else who has a different one, to look in the side of the mirror to see what I may be missing, to give my perspective as a light-skinned Black American male.
Okay. Angela?
Hi, greetings, everyone. I am Angela Marshall. Thank you so much, Kate, for the invitation to be able to come on and just be a part of the solution. That is so refreshing. So many times we hear people that are just complaining and jawing about racism or about stereotype stigmas, but very few are doing something about it. So thank you for that. Again, I'm Angela Marshall. I am a creative content consultant. I'm also a best-selling author of The Story in Life of an Ex-NFL Wife, and I'm a featured author in Women Who Lead Extraordinary Lives all across the globe. I am on this call, I'm on this panel, I'm on this forum simply because I want to learn, I want to listen, and then I also want to share just the knowledge of me being multiracial. I'm sure first sight, people don't really know what my background is, what my ethnicity is. I've had that my entire life, which is really made for some really good conversations. And then there's also been some growth within myself too, to be a little bit more, I guess, empathetic towards others that may or may not know how to identify within themselves. So my goal is just to teach others how to live vicariously through themselves, and also just to help the world to be a better place. Thank you.
Okay, do we want to try again, Doree? Doree?
Mm-mm.
Doree, are you here?
He's frozen, Kate.
Okay. It says someone is trying to enter the studio, but it's both.
Can you?
Hello? Doree? Okay, Doree, if you can hear devices. Okay, he's gone. All right. So I'm going to go to question 2, and if he gets back, we'll add him again. So how did you see the racial implications of the Capitol insurrection? What are your thoughts on that? I guess a show of hands on who wants to comment on that. Alex?
Sure. Well, I think as far as the Capitol insurrection goes, there is no doubt, and it was quite obvious, first of all, that the images that we saw were 98% white people. And it was very obvious that they were very angry, disenfranchised white people. Certainly not a lot of diversity going on there. Although reportedly, one of the leaders of the Proud Boys, white supremacist group, has some Hispanic background. So that's a whole different discussion, I think. But I think what really stood out was if you compare the amount of security and law enforcement that were present on the Capitol steps, comparable to the Black Lives Matter protest over the summer, it was night and day. And just in terms of the numbers and in terms of how they treated the protesters, many of the security taking selfies with the protesters, even opening gates so that they could enter, and in many cases, really using force as a last resort. Whereas during the Black Lives Matter protest, there were more of them. They were far more confrontational and ominous. And in my mind, there is no question that had those protesters been darker skinned, they would have been treated a lot differently.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll say something. And also, to piggyback Alex, is the fact that this is where that entitlement comes in, because you look like me. Yeah, I'm going to treat you a little differently than if you were a different color than me. Because remember the subconscious images we have about certain people of a certain color, they tend to be more violent. They tend to be more what's the word I'm looking for? Well, we'll stay with violent and causing more trouble. But this one, in this case, it's like we will allow you to get away with it and set your point. And if it gets too violent in the protest, then we'll do something about it, which came later on down the line. But back to the point is because you look like me, I will treat you differently. I'll say that's it.
I find it interesting that this is not a new narrative. This is nothing about any of which we've been experiencing is new to any of us in one form or another, right? Yet we keep hearing these things. We know what we saw at the Capitol. We know how they were treated differently. We see all of those things. The why is probably the toughest part, but it isn't in a way. It's about identity. It's about a deep identity that people carry. And, in the beginning, Kate, you said that you felt your parents, it was ignorance and a lack of exposure. To a great deal, that is it. But more than anything, I think that it's about fear. Those people at the Capitol fear that they're going to lose freedoms that they've enjoyed as a race, as a people. I think the issue here is that there's so much fear that no one wants to take the time to really understand and get to know that which they fear, right? False evidence appearing real. We've heard that a lot. And that's what's happening, is that people have been raised with a level of fear that someone is going to compromise their life, their lifestyle, their whatever. I have white friends that I've talked to who have said to me, and that, up until all of this stuff happened, I had no idea how they felt. And what I heard was, this isn't about race. This isn't about you. This is about, I want to protect my freedom in this country. The thing is, we as a people of color, have never had that opportunity to see it that way. We've had to protect in a different way. And so what you're calling your freedom is actually my oppression if you're not careful. So I think that's the discussion. I think we see all the surface behaviors. We understand the surface behaviors, but the truth of the matter is it's about fear. And how do I make you feel better? How do I make you feel better without me feeling worse? That's what, to me, the discussion is.
It's a critical piece to what I've been talking about when it comes to the work we've been doing here in Oregon around really acknowledging what has happened here historically. Oregon was founded as a whites-only state. The complete and total annihilation of indigenous people here. People don't talk about it because Oregon is considered to be this sort of liberal, progressive place, and it is hideously racist. And one of the things that I've been bringing up in conversation with people is you're afraid of losing friends, family, or standing, privilege, right? Like that fear is so critical. And we very rarely talk about it in the context of white supremacist work or anti-racism work. That fear is the foundation that white people really struggle with coming to terms with. And it is the most important piece to starting to explore how we dismantle white supremacy and racism. Fear of losing status, fear of losing friends, and fear of losing family is the starting point to shifting.
What jumped out at me based on what I observed, during the insurrection, and then, many years preceding that, a friend of mine who grew up in Europe and in Germany specifically, had a lot of fears going on. And, I'm like always trying to find the way to be able to have conversations, right? And her worry was legitimate, even made more legitimate on the day of the insurgents. And what I noticed was that the ability for a group to become very much more violent just by the very sake that they were in a group. So this group think that occurs is very much something for us to better understand and to relate to it in a manner, because when a group gets together and they do things, I mean, I'm sure there were people there who didn't intend to do things, and then they did things, right? Just because of the fact that they were part of this group think mentality. So I think that's something really important to note.
Yes. Another thing is what I brought up in the beginning is my parents were, ignorant and unexposed to people of other races. But there is another, they weren't bombarded with, hateful and, bigoted ideas all of their life. There are people who that is what they get. And that's a different kind of racism. It's a different kind of prejudice than hatred, and it doesn't go away as easily as being just exposed to other people and other cultures. And so it needs to be addressed differently, I think.
I sit on the University of Washington Alumni Association, and we're going through some significant training and development around the topic of race. And one of the slides that was presented by the Intercultural Development Continuum was a slide that shows denial to polarization, which is a lot about defense and reversal, minimization, acceptance, and then adaptation. And each of us starts somewhere in this continuum, and moving towards adaptation, moving towards acceptance is the goal. And that's a very important continuum that they've established and are studying and are taking our board through a process so that we can move from wherever it is we are on the continuum to the further place of adaptation. And I'll use my personal story. So I grew up in a home where my father was very, very dark-skinned, my mother very light. And on one particular occasion, we were traveling to the South, and we were stopping for the night. And my dad went in to book a room for a motel, and he was denied. So we sent my sister in, who was very fair-skinned, to book the room, and she was accepted. And so I've grown up experiencing racism, even not just in the United States, but even when I was living in Puerto Rico, there's a lot of racism between the dark-skinned Puerto Ricans and the light-skinned Puerto Ricans. So racism can actually really exist within even its own culture, right? So it's literally taking a look at ourselves. Where do we stand on the continuum? Are we in denial? Are we polarizing? Are we minimizing? As a nation, I'd say we definitely are minimizing. Can we move towards acceptance? And finally, can we move towards adaptation, where we actually are anti-racist, moving towards action? This is really the critical phase that I would love to see more Americans move towards over time.
Yes. So, and does anyone else have any comments on what happened at the Capitol? If not, I'm going to move to the next question. Okay, so if you saw the interview with Oprah about, or with Harry and Meghan, what are your thoughts with regards to similar attitudes within the U.S.?
Well, I would just like to say, coming from a woman who has been on both sides of the coin, as far as being able to tell my story and then being told, how dare you say that you have had prejudices or you've had, racism spewed at you because you're light, you have privilege, you're entitled because you're light skinned. I thought that Meghan and Harry, the interview as a whole, being able to come out and share their journey, I thought that it was therapeutic and it was freeing for them. because as a storyteller myself, and as a writer, as a woman who is just on a global mission to help others to live vicariously through themselves, that's what I exhort people to do. Tell your story and don't back down from it. And others have to respect it, whether you like it or not. Now, one thing that I have heard that I think now people are saying that she can't experience the racism because you can't really tell what she is by looking at her with her color, which is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. But this is something that I have endured my entire life, being brought up in an all African-American family, which the exposure, don't get me wrong, I'm not pro-Black, anti-Black, con Black, Latino, whatever, because I'm a mixture of 4 different ethnicities and I value each one of them. And that's another reason why, and I know we're going to talk about the Black Lives Matter, that's another reason why I don't get into the whole Black Lives Matter. I am human life matters, and that's the way that I see it, and that's the way that I feel. But as far as Harry and Meghan being able to share their story and come out, I think people tell their story and they talk about their messages and their trials and their struggles simply so that they can be free. Because I know for me, that's what it was. It wasn't to make my cousins who were dark skinned and told me that my hair, at the time I had really, really long hair, I keep it cut for a reason, told me that I always thought I was better than, or I was, I wasn't better than because I was light skinned, or I looked different from them, my eye color and all this other kind of stuff. I think that being able to share your journey and talk about it in a way that helps you to become free from any type of stereotype, stigma, pain, pressures, or whatever, I think that that's what you should do. So kudos to Harry and Meghan. Whether or not they should have done it on Oprah, again, I think that's their personal preference. But what I do strongly believe in, and this would be my last point, when I tell my story or I tell my side, you don't get to discount it. So no one gets to discount how Meghan feels, how Harry feels or felt, because that's their story and that's their journey. And that's what I believe in.
Any other comments? Alex?
Hi. I just want to check and make sure everyone can hear me actually this time.
Yes.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay. I'm Coach Doree Arrington. Thank you, Kate, for having me on the show. I've been looking forward to this. So happy that I got to fix the technical issues. What Angela just said, I think it's in simple terms, just that. It's their truth. It doesn't really matter about what everybody else's opinions about how these 2 individuals felt in their life. No one can dictate, no one can say anything other than accepting that. And I thought that with that interview is that they are just speaking the truth, and that's really all that matters. It's about being free enough to say how you feel, what you're experiencing, and going from there and just looking forward. So I just wanted to tap in with Angela in agreement with that, because I don't think you can explain it more. You can try to, but it's in simple. It's just the truth, and that's their truth. And so I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Anybody else? Alex?
Yes, I found it extremely interesting that even the people that are the most privileged, literally in the world, royals, have so many of the same societal issues that we do in greater society. I mean, there was fear, and fear was mentioned earlier on this panel, right? There was fear about the possibility of the baby being quote unquote too dark. There was general fear about essentially Meghan's culture being a stain on the royal family itself. It was fascinating to me, and very similar to what Angela said. You can't tell someone that their experience is valid or invalid. Their experience is their experience, and how they feel about it is their truth. and completely legitimate to them. And so it's been really quite amazing and preposterous to me over the last week to see people on social media primarily really kind of bash everything that Harry and Meghan said because, well, supposedly they're royal, so they have no problems. That's been kind of people's resentment towards it. And I really feel that it also goes beyond just fodder and pop culture fodder in the aspect that Megan revealed that she had, quote, methodical thoughts about suicide and how she wanted to just end it all. And when we allow racism and our views towards race and our experiences based on race to impact our mental health, that's when I would hope people would get serious about it. That it isn't just feelings or emotions or perspective or this is just what you've gone through, what I've gone through. You're young, you'll snap out of it. It's a tough world. All those sorts of mindsets. When you are dealing with mental health, which we don't talk about nearly enough in this country anyway, and you have someone essentially on global television making a plea for help, saying all of these incidents of racism have impacted my mental health. It bespeaks to me what I feel so many have been trying to say, I mean, really forever, but it seems to be more amplified within the last 5 years, is this is more than just my heart. This is more than just my feelings. Personally, I feel like that should be enough. But for those whom that isn't enough, I would hope that when someone begins to say, this is impacting my mental health and I'm contemplating ending my life here, that should be not only a red flag, but a red siren that we all should stop the way we do when we hear an ambulance. We should stop everything we're doing and reach out to that person.
Definitely.
I wanted to
So,
just contribute to that point in regards to what Alex was saying. I believe that also Oprah's opportunity to take a national stage was more like a PSA, a public service announcement, to be aware. What people like Oprah can do with her stage presence is to create greater awareness. And my friends who are assorted cultures, I'm half Japanese, half Chinese. I just found out through an ancestry swab that I'm 11% Korean. Go figure. And I'm married to a German-Irish white boy. And that's why we have basset hounds. Anyways, the ignorance and bigotry of the past have a time now to be shaken. Not stirred, but shaken. And what we want to do is take opportunity in conversations like this to be aware and open our heart space that the former beliefs, our former limiting beliefs, are that from a kind of it just makes me so mad when I talk about this. It's from a British cultural norm in their case, where we have a white cultural norm, we have an Asian cultural norm. Let's break that down into the Chinese and the Japanese and the Korean. We all have our space, and now we're shaking that space.
yes.
And I like that. One thing on that one is this: when Angela and Coach Doris spoke about, she told her truth. That truth rattled the tree. And when you shake the tree, some things are going to fall out that you don't want to see. And this is what we're dealing with. And it's kind of like in America, the killing of what guys? I forget his name.
George Floyd.
Yeah, George Floyd. We saw what actually happens in America. That shook our tree in America for us to actually do something now. And we got to keep going. It was just waking us up. And that's what Megan did. She woke up the palace. Are we? I mean, let's be real. Where did slavery really start? England, Dutch, Portuguese. It's just, so she took a $1,200 system and said, hey, and now we see, do they really think like that? Maybe they can move forward and improve and do something different.
And if I may, let me add one point to that. It's fascinating to me that in the following week, um, the popularity ratings of Harry and Meghan have reportedly gone down. So essentially, they've plummeted with the Brits just for speaking their truth, for simply saying this is what happened to us, this is what we've been experiencing. You know, we've lost our security over this. We had to move because of this. For speaking those truths and revealing all of that, the people in England are would rather preserve their image of how they want the royal family to be and how they want their culture to be, rather than saying, "Let's shake that tree and do something about this." It is fascinating to me. I would certainly wish that there would be some sort of result the way there was in Minneapolis. Uh, with you're right, Michael. I mean, it shook the tree and affect the whole country and really forced a lot of change. And I mean, just a sea tide of change coast to coast. But it's really interesting how it's been the reverse effect in England. Across the pond, people are upset that all of a sudden the family secrets are out, when really this is an opportunity for them. This is an opportunity for liberation to say, hey, this has gone on. And I'm sure, which in England, particularly in London, one of the most diverse cities in the world, where you have quite a few Black British, I'm positive that that interview made millions of folks over there feel liberated, because they were probably saying, yes, this has happened to me as well. But instead of waking them up, it's had the reverse effect. That country is now kind of circling the wagons and saying, well, it's a shame that this was even brought up. It's a shame that this was ever made public. I'm glad they did it, and I hope there is real change affected by it.
Well, Alex, it has had that effect over there. There's a lot of the Black population over there speaking up about how they felt about it, and their Black population over there is fairly significant. So part of the country is um, not on the side of sweeping it under the rug. So
Well, I think we also have to remember, guys, that according to societal culture, truth hurts. That's what we've been brainwashed and programmed into thinking, but it doesn't. Truth heals. And when you walk in that and you actually start letting things out, not just from racism, but stereotype, stigma, family secrets, how you feel, when you start revealing your truth, you start healing. My mentor, she says, you can't heal unless you reveal. So obviously, if people are programmed into thinking, even from little, oh, if I tell the truth, I'm going to get a spanking, or I'm going to be disciplined, or this is going to happen, or there's going to be repercussions and consequences. Who would dare want to tell their truth?
But Angela,
that's just to your point, Alex.
I agree with what you're saying, Angela. I also think that this has a lot to do with identity in general, our deep identity, right? So, when you challenge someone's identity, you're challenging the very core of who they are. And obviously, as individuals, we want to protect our identity. But when you think about group think or crowd think or country think, this is a situation where they are exposed and they already felt that they were elite, that they were, I joke all the time. I was born in New Haven, Connecticut. I remember in school being very excited about the fact I never told people I was born in Connecticut. I said I was born in New England because I had teachers that emphasized New England. And so I thought that was pretty special as a small child. Well, because of that, it was very important that I spoke well. It was very important that I did a lot of things because I was born in New England. That was my deep identity. And it has carried with me my love of education. So if I break that thing down, I understand that about myself. See, self-awareness is important, right? What's happening is that people want to protect their identity, People want to protect what they believe is right, and they are not empathetic to others. And the lack of empathy is what Harry and Meghan are experiencing, a total lack of empathy. It doesn't matter how they felt. It's about how I feel. It's about how our queen is seen or our country is seen. And that's all that matters. And so unless people are willing to be self-accountable, self-aware, then accountable for their feelings and willing to heal, right, Angela? Because as you said, it's about healing. Well, you have to be willing to heal. They don't feel that they have anything that needs to be healed, and so that's the problem. It's just, personal accountability. We don't have enough of that. We don't have enough of that because if each individual were to truly be honest and what they fear, they learn about and take themselves to another level, the whole world would be a better place. But unfortunately, I have to make you shrink in order for me to feel better. That's the attitude. And it's really, really sad.
Definitely. So, I have a question for you all. We have, for the 2 hours, we have about 10 minutes left, and we have about 5 questions that we were going to cover left. So if we go beyond the 2 hours, who can stay and who would have to leave?
I can stay. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I can stay also.
I have to leave.
Okay.
I can stay about 30 more minutes.
You can stay what?
30 more minutes.
Okay. So what I'll say is we'll try to go through, we'll stay maybe an extra half hour, and we'll try to go through most of the questions, and anyone who has to leave, try to let me know in advance so that you can say goodbye and give your contact info. So the next question is, what impacts has the increased emphasis on racial inequities over the past several years that we've been experiencing, and specifically in 2020 had on you personally? So who would like to comment on that?
I'll answer that.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I just want to say, thank you all for being here. I'm really enjoying hearing your conversation. At the risk of sounding like a big baby, I'll tell you what it's been like for the last few years. For a straight white male, sometimes I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, and I'm not looking for sympathy or anything, but I'm just letting you know that when, for instance, if I put something on, I share a post or something, I have to give it a lot of thought. And plus I'm a former comedian too, so my filter doesn't work all that good sometimes. So, when I post something, I'm often, well, I won't say often, but I'm surprised at what people read into it. And I understand that they're coming from with different lenses, and as much as we try to walk in somebody else's shoes, we simply can't. I can try to imagine what it's like to be a black male driving and getting pulled over, but truly I can't empathize completely for those kind of things. But so it has been, and one of the challenges too is that as an ally on all fronts, it does feel like sometimes people, and not everyone, but a lot of people kind of push us away, and by some of the things they say, by generalizations, just like white people may say all black people, people will say, white males are the problem or whatever. And I'm like, I didn't do anything, as far as I know. I'm just saying, subconsciously, who knows? But so I just, that's all I wanted to say. Some of us are really trying to do better, and if we offend you in some way, honestly, a lot of us are not trying to. I swear. We're just trying to learn.
Jim, I have this conversation constantly with my business partner, and she and I are totally opposite, ebony and ivory, I call us. And I love love the fact that she's listening now, so I won't say her name, but I will say this. I love the fact that she allows herself to be vulnerable and ask me questions and discuss things as they come up. And has she always gotten it right? No. And it's funny, she may say something like you said, and I would say to her, "Ooh, don't ever say that again, or don't post that." And she'll go, "Why? I mean, I don't get it." And I will explain it. And she'd go, "Ah, makes sense." You're absolutely right. You're not going to understand how someone else feels about something that you do not have the capacity to feel, because you aren't that person. I think the true ally is the person who's honest, like you just did, and says, "This is what I'm experiencing. This is how I feel." And you, again, if I'm empathetic, I just mentioned we need to be more empathetic, then I obviously have to be able to understand where you're coming from. And I totally can understand it. It's about keeping the dialogue going. It's about being open, not getting all butt hurt. And I think a lot of people get offended and walls go up, and that's it. And that's on both sides. I'm not just saying that's on both sides. So we have to be better, again, about being empathetic, but also about having tough conversations and understanding the motive behind the conversations and not bringing offense into play. But let me just say this really quick. This has to do with geographics too. We have to be careful. As Kate mentioned, all of us on this call are not living the life that some people are in this country. Okay. So I totally get, I'm not the same as perhaps a Black woman who's working, a labor job in Mississippi or wherever. I mean, I'm just pulling something out of the air. There's a difference. So I cannot assume, I hold my own. I don't have any issues with certain things that I know others do. That doesn't mean that I'm not in the struggle or that I'm not supportive. But I actually am, I just don't experience those things because I don't allow it. I believe we teach people how to treat us. But I'm afforded the ability, even with my dark skin, I'm afforded the ability to handle my business in that way, because that's the way I identify. But not everyone is there. So education, keep communicating, stand up for what you believe in, regardless. That's what I say.
So anyone else have a comment on that?
I just like to say, oh, I'm sorry. I just want to say real quick, when you mentioned the South, I'll tell you, I have a preconceived notion that, even though I know this isn't true, if I hear that a white person is from the South, I automatically assume they're going to be racist. I mean, I have to dismiss it quickly. But who was it? I can't remember who was talking about it now. But actually, Oregon is extremely racist. There's a lot of racists in Oregon, Idaho, places in the North, and so I know it's not accurate, but I have that prejudice, against white people.
Jim, you speaking on Oregon, I'm here in Seattle. I see it every day from all shapes and forms. And I'm a young Black coach in a predominantly white neighborhood, and I'm coaching mostly white children. One, I think is very important for me to be in that neighborhood, dressed like I'm dressed, and constantly creating my own narrative to my living, to me being, because I get all kinds of different looks and all different body languages and reactions, because I'm just in an island by myself. And so I experience these things from just the subtleness of different conversations, the topics, just the way that certain individuals decide to approach me. I understand like COVID, and being that social distances, but see, I've experienced that before COVID. And so that being distant and, not too sure what's going on and whatnot. And I try to, I take it with a grain of salt. I take it as it is and I move on, because one thing I do know is that these children are more impacted by what I'm saying to them and my body language more than what their parents are, and so they're gonna go home at the end of the day and either learn something because of what Coach Dury has told them. And I like to be super transparent with my children. I watch a lot of coaches that deal with a lot of children, and I'm always going against the grain. I mean, I've built my success in life by going against the grain and walking on eggshells and testing different things, and thankfully I'm still here. But I'm never afraid to take risks, and I'm never afraid to communicate with all kinds of different people and just hear their stories. And like Davina was saying, is empathy. I walk with empathy all the time. I'm not just some 30 millennial black man, just like super angry and just all this. Like, I feel all these different emotions, but I think at the end of the day, it's about being civil and being able to communicate and talk your truth, whether someone is going to be able to relate. I think a lot of times also that we get to a point where everybody wants to relate to everybody, and you simply cannot. You cannot just relate. And I think with me being in the neighborhood that I do all of my work, it's really important. And so, just going to what you were saying, Jim, the walking on eggshells. I honestly think that we all need to be in that vulnerable place where we just kind of feel like I don't know what's going on, because it's closer to a restart. If we're all at this bottom floor, or we just don't know what to do, it opens the door for conversations on like, hey, well, what do you think we should do here, or what do you think we can do here? So I would encourage you to continue to look to walk on more eggshells and look at it from a different perspective and not be afraid of that. And so that's just my 2 cents. So thank you guys.
Yes, and
Melissa.
Jim,
Melissa.
I would definitely echo what Darcy said. And, the fact that you're uncomfortable, it kind of gives me goosebumps, because I know if you're uncomfortable, you're on your way. And so I encourage anyone who's listening, just to recognize, like Davina said, your own self-awareness. Because I grew up with a dark-skinned parent and a light-skinned parent, I've always known, and a culture that has also racism built into the Puerto Rican culture, I also had to own racism within my own race, right? And this is very little talked about, but it actually exists. And for a long time, as I was growing up, I tried to not acknowledge the dark side of my skin, but the light side of my skin. It wasn't until my father was in the military, and I traveled all through the military, both in Europe and the United States. And I found so much diversity within the military families that were present, that color just disappeared for me. And but awareness comes first. Awareness, education, I think, is second. And once you've educated yourself adequately, then comes, what do you do to take action? Because this is, I think you asked the question, Kate, what's changed for me is the actions that I'm taking, specifically working with, as a board trustee, at-large trustee for the University of Washington Alumni Association. I would say that we are educating our board so that when we are recruiting our other board members, when we are benefiting our members, that we're deeply aware of the actions that we take. Because truly, being that this is a higher education situation, the reality is that alone, in a sense, is a divider, correct? I mean, you've got people who clearly never get to have higher education. And if you look at the numbers, it's minorities that lack thereof. And so at the end of the day, we have to do more when we know more.
I would really love to add something to this, because I think that one of the most...
Nobody talk right now, please. Okay. Some of you are better at jumping in than others, so don't talk unless you raise your hand and I call on you. So Melissa, go ahead. I just wanted to say that because there's been 2 people that have been trying to talk, and everybody has jumped in front of them, even though I called their name. So go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, so I think part of one of the most important aspects of having these conversations is not writing off people's discomfort with them. And these issues are not black and white issues, to use the pun, right? We are not all or nothing. This is messy, messy work. And we have to get really comfortable with being in the mess. And when resistance and rigidity starts to rise, recognizing that and owning that that is where the shift happens. The shift doesn't happen in this all or nothing zero-sum game. The shifting comes from being really uncomfortable with what we're hearing and recognizing individual truths of every single person. Not all of us are going to do this work the same. And I think that's the danger of having conversations about dismantling white supremacy and racism, is that there are people who think it should be happening in a certain way. And the minute that word should comes into play, we stop listening. We stop having empathy. We stop being vulnerable. We put up a wall. And so I think it's really important for us to think about how are we disrupting and dissolving the rigidity with which we approach these conversations, and how are we opening ourselves up to learning about difference and learning about the identities within identities. It's not just about reading a book and being like, okay, I'm not going to be racist anymore, or okay, I understand colonization and decolonization. And like, these are really complicated, difficult conversations and topics that we're bringing up. And so I think that if we listen to each other and really allow grace for that messy, ugly middle, then I think that's where the long-term shifts come about, because this is a lifelong process. This is not I'm going to take a workshop and be more improved. This is a constant unraveling of our ancestries, and really thinking about how have our grandmothers and our grandfathers, who are they? Where do they come from? And how do their stories thread into our lives in 2021?
And Meg?
Oh, Dr. Melissa, thank you so much. I've coined this as hereditary hostage. This is a word that's come to me through spirit, actually, that says what we are doing is dismantling hereditary hostage. It's what we know, what we sing, what we believe, what we grew up with. And if we had a chance to grow up with wonderful people, with guidance, with openness, with empathy, then we have a chance. And I think our action steps are very important, is to, even as we are dancing in the face of microaggressions, it's time to apply micro advocacy. And that's what I teach in my courses, is that we have a chance to give opportunity to hear another person's story or their belief. I was accosted in a Costco early on during the early toilet paper fear. And I had just put one in my cart, and a man, a white man, came up to me and said, "What the F are you doing here? Go back to your effing country." And I said, "Wow, can I ask you what country you're from?" And I said, I was born in Sherman Oaks, California, right on that Ventura Boulevard. Do you know it? I'm just one of those California girls. And he goes, "Fuck you." And I said, "Well, sir, we need to have a conversation. I think you're just scared out of your mind that I just got the last toilet paper, but even more scared of what you are going to dismantle." We had a conversation. Actually, he ended up apologizing to me. I had quite a crowd around me in Costco, and this husband and wife came up to me, and a white gentleman said, I was about to punch him in the throat. I said, no, thank you. I really needed to have this conversation. I really needed to have this conversation, an opportunity to ask him to apply empathy. I listened to him, he listened to me. And suddenly we were from the same hood.
Yeah.
That's
So
all.
did you have something to say, Davina?
That was so good. I was excited. You know, the tough conversation, she handled that beautifully because she got past that initial yuckiness that many people turn and run from or decide to confront in a negative way that only makes it worse. Again, it's about the dialogue, and we don't always know how that dialogue is going to show up, right? But yeah, it's about identity. We keep coming back to identity, and then some people's identity is misplaced. A couple things that were mentioned also that I think is important is when both Bettina and Angela talk about racism or prejudice within your own race. That is another layering, but I want to say that the media, that that everything around you from the time you're little programs you that dark is not good. Anything dark is not good, right? And I heard a comedian say once that it stuck with me, and I think one of you have a comedic background, but it was really funny. He said, you know, why does everything black have to be bad? Why do black olives have to be in a can and not in a jar? Why do the green olives get to be in a jar, right? And so I was a young girl when I heard that, and it stuck with me to this day. And I set out with intention to never allow my skin color or my shade to be an issue for me for that very reason. Because we see inward, right? You know, we feel inward what we see outwardly. And so we have to not embody those negative things about ourselves, because that's why people lashed out at Angela. You know, I know that oh so well, being a dark-skinned girl. I've heard the light-skinned girls get picked on and bullied at school. And I never got that. I never understood it. You don't choose how you're born. I don't get that. You don't get to choose any of that. So why be mean and bully someone for something that they had no control over? It's just ridiculous. But it's about how the person who's bullying feels inside. So my thing is, all behavior is communication, good or bad. What are you trying to tell me? And so in May, you did a wonderful job in getting that guy to tell you what he was really feeling. That's what we have to do more of. And I just think micro advocacy is an amazing concept. I love it. So anyway, thank you for letting me have a few more cents in there, Kate.
So
I wanted to tap.
Go ahead.
Just going back to what Inmay experience was with that guy, I thought that was amazing. It's kind of a technique I use when I'm dealing with kids and adults. I think it comes down to just delivery, the way that we deliver our responses. We can really de-escalate a situation very, very calm and have that same impact as someone with a full force of anger. And I experienced that with a Facebook post that I did earlier this past summer that actually end up becoming one of the most brilliant projects that I put together, and the Seattle Times published it for me. So it was geared by the anger of George Floyd and Aubrey and all of these things. And I just let loose. A lot of people know me for being very cordial and responding respectfully, but this time I didn't give a crap. I was like, look, this is exactly how I feel. I'm angry. I don't like this at all. And I knew that this was okay for me, but it's about the bigger picture. And I didn't want to tie into just expressing anger because it's within me. And I wanted to use that anger to inspire. And I was like, okay, how can I do this? So I decided to revamp my delivery And I came up with a project titled Shoot for Change. So whenever you all get the chance, you just go to Seattle Times and type in Shoot for Change. And it was amazing. I was able to connect with so many different people just by reshaping my delivery, and carrying that same force of anger with me, and just connecting with so many people, just like Jim, walking on eggshells, and so many other people. And we just got to tap into so many different, very close stories that was just amazing. I had over 45 different people just break down in tears. And it was just amazing. I didn't think something like this. And it was about me bringing my tool of basketball and helping open the door for conversations that is just so instilled in our hearts that we don't really know how to go about it. And so in May, that delivery was brilliant, and I think that is how you were able to de-escalate this very confused individual. And so I just wanted to tap into that.
It's happened 3 times.
So there's 3 questions that I want to be sure to get to. And so I'm going to go to the next of those, which is, what is systemic racism and why do we need to address it? So who would like to comment on that? Alex?
Well, I don't know that I can provide a surefire 100% definition of systemic racism, but it actually blends in perfectly with something else that I was going to bring up, because I believe this is a huge part of it, and that is a major part of this discussion. I feel should be the role of class, and how class really fits into our viewpoints of race and how we treat one another. For example, just strictly using the Latino community, I can tell you that those of us who uh, within Latino communities who may be regarded as blue collar, middle class, working class, maybe have family or roots within the farm worker community. I can tell you that we're pretty solid blue voters. Yet in the last presidential election, Trump got more Latino voters this time around than he did in 2016. And from my experience, from people that I know that voted for him who were Latino, it was primarily Latinos who were upper echelon, wealthy, affluent, and their views are very much impacted, quite frankly, by their pocketbooks, by their wealth, by their surroundings. And so I think so often what we view as race relations or systemic racism is also a matter of classism. I think that we essentially so oftentimes people are debased based on whether they are in that other person's stratosphere economically. And I think that's real. I think that's tangible. I think part of systemic racism, not the only part of it, but part of it, is essentially defining the other person based on either what you know or what you perceive their wealth to be. And I think really touching very much upon what Davina was saying and what Anme was saying, if we don't get into each other's perspectives, my view has always been a person is a culmination of their experiences and their ambition. So what they've experienced and where they want to go in life, what their motivations are. And if we don't understand how a person grew up, what sort of wealth level they grew up in, then it's really hard to truly understand them, good or bad.
Okay, who else would like to comment on that? Angela?
Yeah, I just want to add that as far as the systemic racism, I think that the much larger picture is, again, the stereotypes, the stigmas, how you are taught from birth, because you're not born with black is dark and dreary and white is bright and light and better. Or, I talk about it where I share that I had no idea about the haves or the have nots until I went to a fine art school, because I had food, I had shelter, I had clothing, and what was right in front of me was more than enough. I thought my family was well off, that I was birthed into. I thought we had the love, we had transportation, we had shelter. I had no idea about this whole other, community outside of mine that was supposed to be better than and other than. So for me, I really think that before you can dismantle, as we have all said, any of it, it has to be a retraining of the brain. And that's one of the things that I use in my tips and tools for success. Retrain your brain. I don't care. You can go and we can fight with the police system and say they're corrupt. We can say there's discrimination in practices in hiring blacks, whites, short, obese people, or whatever the case is. But until people really retrain their brain, and there's processes and there's programs in place to help people just to value themselves and value others, I really don't see, this whole, country that's going to, where we're going to kumbaya and hold hands together and we're going to all walk in, the whole dream that Martin Luther King Jr. had. I think that what we can do is what we can do. And that's, as we know better, we do better, and we speak up and we speak out about it. Just like, with May, and then with Coach, how he mentioned about, okay, I was angry and I was spewing stuff. But then I said, well, let me channel it into something inspirational, which I think that when you take a different approach, a more positive approach to any of this racism, stereotype, stigma, because I mean, let's all be honest. We all have some sort of prejudices or some sort of stereotypes. I know I do in different walks of life that I'm trying to get better at and trying to overcome and do something a little different. I don't really see in a be all end all. I think that it's going to start mentally, and you have to get people, in from the school systems as they're coming out, and just have a lot more programs, like I said, and processes in place to help people to understand why belittling, berating, being destructive towards somebody else, whether they live here or their zip code is this or their name is this or they have 39 commas in their bank account, why you still shouldn't look at that person as, as superior or as inferior. So I think that, until we really get a handle on that, I really don't see the picture or this picturesque, like people are saying, oh, well, I'm going to come up with this organization and that organization. You come up with as many organizations, even from this panel. We all have viewpoints and perspectives and outlooks, and they're all positive, and we all want to help. But, until we actually reach out and, start incorporating those people that we're talking about helping, and then they reach back and they help, and then they reach back and they help, I don't really see a whole lot as far as systemic racism. I don't see how that's going to change. I've gotten opportunities by who I know as opposed to what I knew. So to me, that's a form of stereotype. That's a form of stigma. That's a form of, some could even call it a little form of racism because I knew so-and-so and they pulled my resume as opposed to the other one. I've been entitled. I've been on both sides of it. So, that's just my 2 cents and my experience with the whole systemic racism. Does it exist? 100%. Does racism exist? 100%. It does. But I think that until we really, really get into the meat and potatoes of individual mindsets, I don't really see it getting better.
I want to say something about that. And I agree with you, Angela, that individual mindsets are important. And as individuals, that's where we have to start. but there are some things in our society, like say something that Michael knows something about, the justice system, the fact that, you know, there's a really high percentage of Black men in prison, and they go to prison for lesser offenses than white men or women do. That's one of the systemic inequities. And those things are hard for us to address individually. We have to address them as a society. And that's part of what the systemic racism is. Does anyone have any comments, solutions, ideas on that, Davina?
Yeah, I want to say that there's a lot of different terms being thrown around, and when you it depends on the lens in which you look at it. You can call it racism, or you can call it bias. You can call it classism or sexism, or there's all of these different things that are happening. But back to the point of, yes, there are a lot of biases. Where systemic racism really, I think when I hear the term, I think back historical. I think way back. It's not a new thing. It's an old thing, and it's a generational thing. And that shows up when people are in power, when people are judges or police officers or teachers. I mean, I am a teacher. I understand very well how we could say there's systemic racism in education, because we all know that everything was sanitized and real history was taken out. And, so to me, there are these things that have happened historically that play well into what we now see as systemic racism, because your biases are based on what you've been taught. So the biases are what's driving the notion of systemic racism, in my opinion. We may not know why that judge who sits on a bench decides to throw the book at this one young man who happens to be, who happens to look like Dari, as opposed to the next one. And so we may say it's racism, but it may be a culmination of a few different biases. At the end of the day, the truth of the matter is, it has to do with a system that is not fair, that continually perpetuates the same practices unchallenged. That is, everything is a system. But when that system starts to fail people, it fails people when people are excluded from it. And that's what we're seeing. And I also think that people get offended when you bring up, especially people of color will get offended if you bring up the notion of racism all the time. We use that word all the time. And now it's like, okay, God, is everything racism? Is everything racism, right? And I even I start to feel that way, because, especially during the last presidential administration, I got tired of hearing it. But the truth of the matter is, it's about a lot of stuff: insecurities, biases, miseducation. It's about a lot of stuff. To your point, Angela, it's not a solve overnight, because we still haven't figured out what all the proper terms are. And class very much so has something to do with it. Money has everything to do with what we've been experiencing in this country. Don't make no mistake about it. I say more about money than about race. Understand that obviously the people with the money are the people who aren't of color, by and large. I mean, we have some exceptions, obviously, right? The point is, we don't even have our glossary straight. We don't even understand all the terms. We're mixing the terms up. It's about bias. It's about stereotypes. It's about all the stuff that we've mentioned.
Davina, it's not really bias, because bias isn't such a bad thing. Everybody has it. It's when it crosses over into bigotry that it becomes the
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. But it starts with you being biased. It starts with you if you're if a person has no control, I agree, racism or any ism has to do with the person who has the control over the people who are experiencing it, right? It has to do, in the workplace, we know that. In any place where someone's making a decision, but it does start with, you learn when you're young to be biased about certain people and certain things. Somehow you've learned this either from your parents or from what you've experienced yourself. White kids get bullied in school, right, by other Black kids or other races, right? And then they grow up having a fear because, maybe they lived in an area where they were the minority. I've had those conversations. I've had conversations with people who said to me, "You speak well." Well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the understanding, right? Dari, you probably had, the understanding is I shouldn't. Why do you speak well? I mean, because there's a bias. There's something going on in their minds that they associate. Black people don't speak well, apparently. I don't know. But I've heard that my entire life. That doesn't mean the person that says it. I mean, it started with my teachers. You're special. You're exceptional. You're smart. You may go places in life. It starts in school. And it just perpetuates, right? And so does that teacher feel she's racist? No. She believes intrinsically that I'm special because I speak well. It is what it is.
I want to say something because when I was in college, I took Black Studies. And at the same time, I was taking psychology courses. And I came across this study where they had babies. And they studied how babies reacted to people that were not like them, like other babies that were white and Black and Asian. And I was disappointed at the time to find out that babies are inherently biased. They like people that are like them better. And I was kind of disappointed because I was hoping that, to babies it wouldn't matter. But what I eventually came to decide was when they continued this study, and what they found is, yes, babies have that bias, but over time, when exposed to different cultures and different people, that bias lessens, and they are judging on different things then, like similar interests and character and things like that. So bias by itself isn't enough to create bigotry and racism.
Right.
It goes beyond that.
So, Kate, I want to ask about the babies. Do you believe that initially that has to do with fear of seeing something that you don't understand? It's different than when you look at a baby and they have their parents and that's all they know, and their parents look a certain way. And then I've had kids in the grocery store buggy. I'm standing right behind a family, and the kid looks at me and then starts crying. I don't know what about me. Could be my hair, could be a lot of things, but it's something different. And our nature is survival as human beings. Our instinct is to survive. And whatever is a threat to that survival, we react to. Babies are reacting to what they don't understand. And yet that over time, once they realize, oh, more people have a different color skin and they're exposed, then that lessens the fear. But that to me is not, that's just about survival. It really is.
Yes, I think it's two things. I think it's, yes, fear of the unknown, And the other thing is just that, you know, we like things that are like us. And everybody does seem to have that bias. That isn't a bad thing in itself. It's, you know, if you take it further to bigotry, which is disliking or prejudice against someone just based on something like race or culture or political party or anything, like you're disliking them because they're part of this. So my 2 cents.
Go ahead, Jim.
So
one thing I would like to say, if I could, regarding what Davina said about bias, I think that the bias is a great place to start because it's a much easier sell. You know, you can, because if you start telling people, because this is the thing that I see from some of my Facebook connections, is that they think everybody's calling them racist, and nobody wants to be a racist. But everybody, I think, if you have any kind, if you're not smart enough to understand you have bias, we're not getting anywhere with you anyway. But but I think that you can sell that to them as like, look, you may not be a racist, but you certainly have biases, and unless you are aware of that and you actively try to rectify that, to even go against your biases, then you're going to be stuck. And so I really like the idea of bias, and I think also that bias is going to, if we don't address it, it's just going to keep trickling in and just continuing on with this systemic racism that we have. And I think, I think sometimes people, what I've heard is people say, well, it's not written down, it's not, it's not kind of codified, so it's not really systemic racism. But I do think it's system wide. We see it everywhere. But again, a lot of this could simply be coming from a place of bias. Nobody's trying to do any harm, but this kid in front of me who did this bad thing, whatever it is, if I can relate and go, wow, that looks a lot like my son, I'm probably going to be a lot more lenient as a judge than if I see somebody and they look like what I've seen on TV as like a thug, right? It's going to be tough to get away from that kind of a bias, and I think it needs to be educated, trained. I don't know what.
Yeah, in the law enforcement, you got to take an intrinsic bias class. So we take an intrinsic bias class, and they put up on the screen, what do you see? They showed a black man, right? And he was dark, and everybody got to put in their answers. And the first thing that came up was thief. Then the second, the bigger the word, the more popular. And then it was aggressive. And then it was athletic. And then it was anything smart, intelligent was way out there, very small print, right? And it's like, wow, I'm going. And so it's like, you ain't got a chance. So we're talking about the bias, and the policemen have to take this class. What are they seeing when they get out there? Who are they arresting, and what is their impression of them as opposed to a human being? I'm going to arrest a human being. No, he's a black human being. Therefore, he deserves a certain specific type of treatment. Okay. And when I see this, and people of color can talk about this, what do you see when you look at me? What does that baby see? And I always go like this, because we're trying to change the mind of policemen and how they operate. Well, you got to go back to, everybody talked about, as Davina stated, and everyone here has mentioned, what goes on at home on that dinner table. Who's saying what about certain people, and how is it ingrained? And then they go, then you get to the school, and then it's more ingrained, and then we take it out, and then guess what? We get to use that. And like you said, Joe, we got to take a step back and go, hold on, before I judge that person, let me, of what I learned from the classes or anything, let me just make sure, no, that's a human. Let's see what he does first before I make an assessment. And that's what we don't do. We just, because it's easier just to, stereotype, that group does this, we're good. It's just easy. And until we understand, I love history. Things start from somewhere. You just don't sit there and go, well, they came that way and this way. Well, if you read the history books about our history and what they did, man, I was doing this one of these, let's kill Whitey for a minute. I said, whoa, but it's history. It's history. I got to chill out here. And look at my complexion. Because where I come from, I grew up in Minnesota in the 60s and 70s. I think I'm darker than you, Davina. I do. Because that N-word flew with me when I was in first grade. I got 11 siblings. My twin is your color, right? And then he's shorter though. You'll know that. So we got that N-word, but I was fighting through. I was fight. That's all we did because there were 4 of us, and we just fought because of the N-word. They wrote on the schools. So I'm always one of my biggest. I guess what I'm comfortable with is white males. Come on, say something. I dare you to say something. I'm waiting, and I got to calm down because I got to go like this. Well, they weren't there in the 70s and 60s, but I heard it through college too. So let me just wait. So these are the survival mechanisms we develop, and until we can sit there, until we can tell these people who haven't been there and go, listen, you have to understand where I come from. Because Davina, you went to college. I'm sure Ann May went to college, and Bettina, they touched your skin and said, wow, your skin's that. Wow, does that come off? Or does your hair get wet? Right? These are the things. And like you said, it was an innocent question. I said, I can't blame you for that because you've never met anyone who looked like me. You see it on the TV, and that TV propels all kinds of things. And I go like this. If you see the black man stealing something on TV in the 7-Eleven or a brown man, he can take $400 or $500. But if you look at the 2 white nuns over here who stole $500,000 from the school, who's more of the thief? Okay, it's just how it's just this whole thing of how we think of certain people. When you say doctor, what do you think about? White male. When you say police officer, what do you think about? White male. Say thug, oh, that's a black guy. Oh, all the way. So these are the things that we got to really take a step back and go, take time to picture or get the truth of who these people are before we make an assessment.
Definitely. Yes. So, what is anti-racism, and why does it matter? I mean, people have been saying that recently, that we don't need to not be racist. We need to be anti-racist. So, what does that mean? And
Are you calling on me, Kate? I don't want to be out of order.
I might go with you, but you jumped in before.
Because I'm so good at that. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to say that anti-racism has to be about taking a stand and advocating against racism. It's not enough to say, I'm not a racist. Now we need to take it a step further, and whenever witnessed or encountering it, do something, say something. Do not be a standby person, like standing by while people are being bullied, because that to me is no different than being a bully yourself. Now, let me add something to that, because I've been in some heated discussions about this point, in that people saying, well, what am I supposed to do? I go through my life. I have a job. I have a family. What do you want me to do? Right? So what I believe, there's an intersection between that and the other thing that intersects is the other notion of what do you call it when you are privileged? So white privilege is another term that's been loosely thrown around. So when you look at white privilege, a lot of times what it is what we see as privilege is the fact that you don't see what's happening around you. You don't see the racism. You don't see the behaviors because you haven't had to see it. You haven't lived a life where you would recognize it. You and I can be in a car driving down the street and certain things can happen. And I know comedians, I love stand-up comedy, so I always refer to comedy, but comedians often talk about young Black kids with white friends, and the cop pulls them over, and the white kid just, what are you doing? How dare you? Blah, blah, blah. And the Black kid is like scared to death. It's because the white kid has no understanding of the danger, the inherent danger of talking back to this cop. Whereas the Black kids' whole orientation is, and they've been taught not to do it, right? Well, anti-racism says, I see it. I see you. I see how you feel. I see what you've been experiencing. I understand, and I'm against it. And so I have friends that I know very well, if they witness something happening, a bias toward me that seemed racially motivated, they would step up and say, wait a minute, and put themselves on the line. And I think that just like the young man who was almost hung in the woods that was in the media when he was out, I don't know, star watching or whatever he was going to do, and he was with, there were white people that were around, they put themselves in harm's way. They stood up for him. If they had walked away, they could have very well said, I'm not a racist. I would never try to hang a guy in the woods, but it's not my problem. They didn't do that. These people stayed and begged and put their phones up and said everything they could to get that guy from the clutches of these people who were obviously drunk and who would have probably killed him. That's anti-racism. That's saying, I see you, you matter, I get it. I'm not gonna, not on my watch. That's how I define it.
Absolutely. Alex?
I love stand-up comedians too, Davina. Just wanted you to know that. I quote them all the time. I believe that anti-racism, a major part of it is you oftentimes will hear people, or I'll have friends that are primarily white say, "Well, I don't see race. I don't see race, so don't talk to me about race because I just don't see it." And I tell them, no, what anti-racism is we want you to see us. We want you to see race in the sense that we want you to know our experiences, our culture, our heritage, and just like you just brought up, we want you to know why a cop approaching is a far different experience for some people as opposed to others. That not everyone has the same feelings or has had the same experiences when it comes to law enforcement or anything else. We want you to acknowledge who we are. We want to be seen. I also believe that part of anti-racism is what everyone right now is calling cancel culture. To me, it's not cancel culture, it's accountability. And mind you, I think every example should be looked upon as an individual example as to whether something should be quote unquote canceled or not. Every example merits individual discussion. But as a whole, I personally am glad that we are experiencing this reckoning because for centuries we have allowed ourselves to build statues and schools and states and cities, for Pete's sake, of known racists. And we have allowed for movies and TV shows and any other form of entertainment that we have consumed to have racist overtones, and we just wink at it or look the other way. And now there is a reckoning. So I think that is also part of anti-racism. And then finally, the last thing that I'll say is I think so much of a part of that is being able to just acknowledge who other people are, who we are, how we view each other, and just dialogue. And just dialogue and make sure that we move forward and acknowledge again, I see you, I feel you, these are my experiences, and let's move forward.
Okay. Did somebody, Bettina?
And sometimes it starts in the most simple of ways, because we have just accustomed ourselves to certain language. Speaking about the difference in crimes, we call it white collar crimes. We have the blacklist. We have the black platinum card. We have the black everything. It's like it's either black or it's white. And so just something as simple as paying attention to your own languaging and also identifying some things in our culture that we've just gotten plain used to saying that needs to go away, you know. And words have power, they have meaning. You know, you can have a lot of messaging that's going into our children without meaning to do harm, but doing a lot of harm. And so I think when we address our language, when we listen for what others are saying, bring correction to the conversation. You know, I want to go back to N. May's opportunity there. I was saying that, you know, we're here to create memories, not nightmares. So, you know, that's another anti-racist action that I'm taking, is to make sure that when I am conversing with people who may very well be racist, who may be in fact bigots, is to be able to cut through the black and white thinking, the thinking that they're different, so different than me that we can't have a conversation, to lean in, to grab a hold of that heart, open that door to do something more powerful that love would help heal. So I think the words and the actions, I think that's when I think about anti-racist, I think about education, I think about changing my language, I think about catching the subtleties and the nuances of things that are going on in the world that are just so, they're like on the surface. I mean, just to give you an example, when I was first out in the nursing world and I was working at a couple of hospitals, they would each hospital selected me to be in a photo opportunity there. I was like thrilled, you know, but subtly they were also saying, we want you in there because you represent race. Subtle. And I still remember this to the day. That happened like 40 years ago, right? Or 30 some years ago. That's a subtle thing. How do we use our words? How do we use our actions to make action happen for the greater good?
Yeah, I got that.
Angela?
Yes, I don't know if you guys can see behind me, but my banner, it says, words, the heart and mind obey them. So I agree 1000%. It's all about what we speak and how we speak. I think there's a duality, but you have to have good conscience to know what that balance is. Sometimes it's like, well, silence, to walk away when there's too much confrontation, or where, you know, what you're trying to stand up for, it probably could go south and not end well. Or when there's need, like with May and the situation that she had with, you know, being able to work through the confrontation, the hostile confrontation that she had with the gentleman. But, you know, sometimes we're taught suppression is good. No, I'm not going to say anything because, oh, that silence means that I'm strong. But in any form of racism, silence means you're weak and you need to speak out. I have so many instances. I'm just going to share this one, and I know people are going to shake their head in agreement, and they're going to understand that is a commonality that has been, you know, ingrained into our culture for so long. Good versus bad hair.
Oh,
What the hell and why? Okay. Where does that come from? I don't know. I've had so many people. Oh, you got good hair. Oh, you got that good stuff. Oh, you got good hair, good hair, good hair. One of the things that I have taken to heart and am trying to drastically change the verbiage of that, it's not a good versus bad hair. It's texture. My hair is a different texture, and it's not that it's good or that it's bad. I am not Beyonce. I don't wake up like this. This is products. And even when I had long hair or whatever else, it's always products. And it's time for me to do what needs to be done for me to look presentable with my hair. But there's, you know, even, and that seems so trivial with people saying, oh, you know, well, she got that good stuff, or he has good hair or bad hair. But what happens is you ingrain that into our children, and they hear that, and what are they supposed to think? You know, if their hair does not look like mine and someone is calling my hair good, what's the opposite of good? That must mean their hair is bad. So, being able to speak up and speak out whenever I'm faced with that situation. I had another young lady, I was walking around the track, and she was an older, I'm assuming she was a Caucasian lady. I'm not really sure. She looked white to me, but she's always saying how angelic I look. Now, I have another friend of mine who's darker than me. True story, that's darker than me. We're walking the same time, but she's always complimenting me. She's always saying, how I look angelic and how pretty I am. So this one particular meeting that we had, she said, Angela, because I know, got to know her a little bit. She said, Angela, black and white sure make pretty babies. And I said, you know what, Miss So-and-so, black and black make pretty babies too. Latino and Latino make pretty babies also. Mexican and Mexican, Asian and Asian. I mean, I just kind of went down the line because, again, to me, silence in that particular situation would have meant that I was weak and that I was not necessarily accepting what she said, but that was my opportunity to say, no, what you're saying or how you feel about that situation is a little off balance, but I'm just going to impart how I think about that. So I agree. I think anti-racism is definitely is needed, but I think it's for all stereotypes, not just, again, I know this particular forum is maybe a little bit geared towards black and white, or the race relations, but it's so much bigger and broader than that for me, because I'm on all ends of the spectrum, where I grew up with my grandparents, didn't have a mother and father in the home, so I was that statistic. And then I was unwed and pregnant, that statistic. Then I was divorced, that statistic. Then I'm light skinned trying to fit in, that's the elite NFL lifestyle, that statistic. So I just feel like, as you know better, you definitely should do better. And you're not silent, especially when you know that people could potentially be hurting by something that is viewed upon that, I'm more superior in this vein because my hair is this texture, or because I'm lighter, or because my ex-husband played football, or whatever the case is. And it just, it has to be, I think, tactfully handled. And so that's my take on anti-racism.
Yes, you're right. It is all related. All of the inequality and oppression is related. It's not just race, it's gender, it's money, it's everything. So we're down to two last questions now. One is, and everybody can answer this. What is one way we can move forward and see real change? So if everyone could just give their 2 cents. Davina?
Okay, Davina first.
Oh, did you have your hand up,
Bettina had her hand up. I saw Bettina.
She had her hand up first.
Oh, okay, Bettina then.
Mm-hmm. You're muted.
Uh-oh, you're muted.
Bettina?
Sorry about that. Okay. So I would be remiss if I didn't speak into the conversation of empowerment, because at the end of the day, this is at the helm of this entire conversation, is empowerment, and if you define that empowerment, which is about change, it's about choice, it's about power, and it's about the process by which individuals or groups with little or no power and ability make choices that affect their lives. This is more of a unifying conversation, because then we're not talking about bigotry, then we're not talking about race, we're not talking about a number of things, and it's an easier way for people to come into the conversation. And I know that many people are trying to find their voice, and they're seeking the words that are right for them to fully express their talents, their intelligence, and their power, because your words are your ambassadors, and they open and they shut those doors that we know help to teach people how to treat you. and how to believe in you and how to change your life. So I think that would be my final comments, is that empowerment delivers choice. And somebody said earlier that it's about the money. That is another key thing. We need to shatter the glass ceiling for those that have been disempowered. And until we do that for all, we haven't really gotten very far as a culture, as a nation, as a world, in my view. Thank you so much for having me, Kate.
So, who's next?
I'll go really quick. So just to answer the question about what's one thing we can do to move forward, I think we can make real change by individually thinking of how can we create a soup. And what I mean by that is a soup with three things, is three ingredients, I should say. A soup filled with compassion, a soup filled with empowerment, and a soup filled with redefining what self-dignity means to each individual. And I think that if we can really all stir this soup together, we can find that what changes everything is love. And I think love is what connects all three of those things together, that will overpower this person's thought over this person's thought, or she looks like this, or what Angela says, the good hair, or I'm a young black man, dark skin, and I wear a black hoodie and I'm non-threatening. Inmate looks like this. Michael, he's got this gray beard going on. He can be this. Jim is over here walking on eggshells. Oh, but he's a comedian, so I don't need to trust this guy. Davina's looking like this, and all of these different things. Compassion, empowering, and redefining self-dignity. The soup, that what we're gonna feast on is love. That's what it's gonna come down to, love. And because love heals everything, and it has no vision for racism, it has no vision, or this person deserves this much love. It is just there. And I think that if we all collectively create that soup, we're going to be tasting the same thing, and we're going to be able to say, hey, it seems like you're running low on your soup. Would you like to have some of mine? And boom, there we go.
Okay, you're making us all hungry, Dree.
Hey,
Angela.
I just looking at it from that perspective. I really do think that. So I'm glad I can feast your appetite.
Angela.
Yes, thank you. And I'm ready for the soup. I will say it's just going to go back to what my company and others that I'm trying to forge with, and that's putting programs in place for our youth. You have to catch people, I believe, at a certain age, because once you've gotten like 49 like me, we're pretty much stuck in our ways. There's a lot for me to learn, but I'm a little bit more stubborn. But I think that if we catch them very, very early, I'm talking like, daycare age, elementary school age, middle school age, high school, and it becomes a mandatory course, college, it becomes a mandatory course, that a lot of the things that we are learned, that is learned at home or the environment that we're in, some of it, I believe we can make change, and we can affect change in, how we view other people, regardless of what we hear around the dinner table. I heard lots of stuff around multiple dinner tables that I sat at from family members and friends and whatnot. But me today, I can stand very, very confidently and proudly in what my values and my beliefs and how I think, I should uphold myself, and how I should also look for others. And I think that by having programs that teach trust, that teach valuing other people, all of the things that are going to make that whole superior, inferior line go, disappear. I think that would be very, very necessary. We have all of these other classes and courses in school. Some of them you don't even use later on in life. That's a course you would definitely use. And I think it would definitely, hold its weight to just help us to unlearn, to retrain, to empower, to engage, just to really respect everybody as a whole. So that would be my 2 cents in what we can do. I think their mandatory programs need to be put in place.
Yes, definitely. Alex?
We are approaching the year anniversary that we first heard the name Ahmaud Arbery come into our consciousness. Many people, I think popular notion is that the George Floyd murder was the first movement that really encompassed all communities and all ethnicities. I believe that it actually began with Ahmaud Arbery because I remember, and I want to say it was April 24th, that number sticks out in my mind. I recall April 24th, 23rd, somewhere around there. The reason it stood out was because when I read that the actual murder occurred a month earlier, my first reaction was, are you kidding me? This happened over a month ago and the police have hid it for a month? And then when I posted that on my social media, the outrage that came from so many others of all ethnicities and all communities, the mutual outrage that this happened, I felt was a turning point for our country. And then, of course, when Mr. Floyd was murdered over Memorial Day weekend, that really was the tipping point. In order to combat all the things that we have talked about, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us. And that includes not simply preaching to the choir and having communities of color be the one to lead this discussion. It's going to take all of us. Part of that, and this is my final point, part of that is you began this discussion, Kate, by asking us about the Capitol insurrection. I keep going back to beyond politics, what would make people do those things? And it was mentioned earlier, the word fear. The people that led the Capitol insurrection, people that abide in racism and opposite of what Coach said, do not live in love. They're living in fear. They are fearing that something is being taken away from them. They are fearing that so-and-so communities are taking over. On May just logged off, but when that gentleman accosted her at the store, he was obviously operating in fear above all else. And that really showed itself through hatred. We need to find out why people are fearing the things they are, why that fear exists. We need to combat that, obviously, but we need to have the same vigor and unity and collective, and have the same collective determination that we did with Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, and not just let tragic events like that be a flashpoint. We need for this to be a daily discussion, but it's going to take all of us.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay. Inmate, do you want to go? No. Okay. No, I mean, do you want to say what one thing we can do is?
Oh,
No, I want to stay. I want to stay.
I don't want to go.
That's
See, there's two different meanings here. Okay. I think it's micro advocacy. If you see something, say something. If you feel something, do something. It's serious. It's a serious condition now. This is another form of a pandemic. Please. And my form is to address with humor, address with kindness, address with empathy. And you're going to walk away with a friend. That man in Costco, he had diapers in his crate. And I know he was scared for his babies. So that's where I started. I said, you're scared for your babies. You are scared for your babies. I get it. I have a lot of those. we create commonality. Thank you.
Michael?
Whew. Wow. To see change, man. I'm looking at this small miracle. You know, when Alex talks about fear, and we have Livina talk about money, and you have a certain dominant group that's been a certain way and a certain belief and ideology for 200 or maybe more years. We'll talk about America, and you've been on top, you know, and it's been your way, and you've had your way. And now things are shifting, and it is a scary proposition. It is so scary. So when they say working class men, what they really mean is poor whites. And it's scary that the women are graduating from college more. You see more women having more businesses. All these things are changing. And it's like, well, hold on, we had this way just because we were entitled or we were privileged because of our color. That's not really working. So it's a scary proposition. And my question is, why can't we know this is a melting pot. Why is it so difficult to have the melting pot for everybody to do their thing and come together as one? So in order for this to change, the people who have the fear need to recognize and understand their own privilege and what they can do with that. And to possibly support everyone who comes up and not be afraid of change. And not because we are becoming brown. This is a browning of America. In 2020, 2042 or something, the whites will be the minority. That, man, they're like, what? Right? Yeah, it's scary. And the other one would be to examine our own biases and consider where they came from. Why do you think this way? If you look at something, does that thing say because you look like that, you must be blank, as opposed to let me understand you as the human being? And that's a hard thing for people to swallow. And so we really got to really sit down and go, where does that come from? And not judge and just criticize and stereotype and put these people in a category. And I want to see you as the human being. So when I see a black man or a black woman or Hispanic, these are people to me. And until they do something, say, okay, well, you're that kind, well, you're not very, okay, so I get it. But you're still that person or that ethnic group, but everybody has a bad seed. Okay, we get that. But we get that. But yeah, the human condition, man, I wish people would see that. So yeah, wake up, people, and just acknowledge, what you're going through. All right, I'm out.
Love it, Michael.
Well, okay, so I believe wholeheartedly that it starts with the individual, right? And so with like with the workshops that I teach, there are so many different lenses in which we can see all the things that we've talked about today. And so starting with why you have the fear as an individual and doing the work to understand yourself first. I don't think that you can do much beyond yourself if you haven't rectified who you are. And so I'm very much so a proponent of personal development, right? And like Angela said, start when they're young. That's why I work with teens and youth, because I believe that if we can help them get beyond some of the things that they may encounter in the future, that would be very beneficial. I also understand that we all have experienced trauma at some point in our lives. We've all experienced adversity. Those are the things that shape in our brain as we understand the elasticity of our brain, and we understand that we think a certain way and we are a certain way. So it's so much deeper than us just looking at someone and saying, all we need is love. Although we know that to be true, it's getting people to the point where they can recognize that. That's the hard part. So what I would say is that if each individual could be personally accountable to be better, to live their best life, it would change the world immensely. I keep coming back to each individual be accountable. Be accountable for your actions and be accountable for the way you think. Now, beyond that, it gets so much better once you start working on yourself. When your cup is full, now you can go beyond that and you can start to fill the cups of others. So I say personal accountability.
Great. So the remaining people that are here that were able to stay, since we've gone way over time, could you please give one short last thought from today's show, and then your contact information if people want to get in touch with you. So we'll just go around in order. So Davina.
I'll be very brief. DavinaLyons.com. Go to my website, DavinaLyons.com. You see the programs I offer, what I do with my monthly workshops. And I just want to say that communication is one of the greatest things in the world. Afforded the opportunity to communicate in the way that we have today, Kate, is absolutely essential. I thank you. That's it.
Alex?
We need to continue to do what we're doing today. And I thank you, Kate, for providing this forum. I thank you for allowing us to share and discuss and take it out to everyone. We live in an era and an age of the most amplified communication in the history of the world. We need to use that for good. As someone said earlier, when you see something, say something. When you feel something, say something. And when you see another group being marginalized that may not necessarily be your group, so to speak, say something as well. Even social media commentary makes a difference because it's shaping the way that we view the world, and we need to continue to live in love and live as allies for one another. You can reach me at alexmontoya.org, and I'm also on just about every social media platform you can think of, including TikTok. So find me anywhere.
Awesome. I think today's show was magnificent. I think it was much needed. We need to continue to have these shows. For me personally, it just opened so many different perspectives from all of you, amazing, inspiring individuals. And I think that continue to having these type of conversations while having action followed up behind it is greatly needed. And so I think today, once we all log off here, we're going to go about that in very micro ways. And then it'll turn into magnificent ways. And so I think with today's show, thank you, Kate. Again, so grateful every time you invite me to be a part of these conversations. I love it. It gives people to see me outside of being an athlete and a coach, and seeing my perspective from worldly standpoints. And so I think that's what I got from today's show. How you can contact me is just generally through Facebook, Doree Arrington, Facebook, and it lists all of my other social accounts on my Facebook. I'm easy to contact, message me, whatever. So yes, that would be the best way to contact me on there.
Ray Arrington on Facebook.
Yeah, Doree Ray Arrington. Yeah, I use my full name, so I want the world to know my full name. So.
Yes, Bettina.
Oh, thank you so much, Kate. This has been just an invigorating conversation. You did a marvelous job at putting together a panel. I was the last minute ad, and I have to say, this was a great morning for me. I'm actually the founder of We Empower You community and the WeEmpowerYourLife.com website, and we have monthly, we have weekly, and we have annual and quarterly meetings, events, summits, mixers. And so just go to WeEmpowerYourLife.com. I'm here to help shatter the revenue glass ceiling. I'm all about empowerment, and this is a worldwide movement that I've started. So we're in countries all across the world. WeEmpowerYourLife.com. Again, accolades to you here, Kate, for putting us all together.
Michael?
Let's see here. We are in the tunnel, and we are in part of a difficult conversation that needs to be exposed. And all this truth telling makes this uncomfortable. But we need to keep going down that road because we keep shaking that tree and we can't stop because this systemic racism has gone on for a long time, and certain people are getting tired. That's basically what's happening. And so keep pushing, keep talking, and do it in a way that's dignified, and get the people who are uncomfortable with them to open up more, so they can go, oh, so this is what you guys experience every day. Yeah, have some empathy for that. So the more we can get people to talk about it, especially the dominant culture, the more we have an advantage to really move forward step by step and down the road. Hopefully everybody can be a kumbaya. But yeah, keep shaking that tree. Hold up. That's right. I'm
Go ahead.
MichaelOden.com. It's real easy. MichaelOden.com. You can find all the programs, and our company is called Final Step International. FinalStepInternational.com. Thanks, everyone.
Angela?
Thank you so much again for having me, Kate. I want to say, as a former, and I'm sure the coach is going to appreciate this statement, as a former NFL wife, change and evolution can only come about with players in the game. You cannot affect change by being a spectator or being on the bench. Everyone on this panel today is a player, and y'all are a starter. And I appreciate that, from the diversity to the mindset to the insight to the perspectives. But you're in the game, and I think that that's a great thing. I try to really encourage and teach my mentees that when you're a spectator, you can't win the game. You have to get off the bench and get in the game of life. And that's what everyone on this panel has done. So kudos to you guys. I've learned so much. I've absorbed so much. I can be reached. www.inotherwordsbystone.com. Or you can just Google Angela Marshall. I too am like Alex. I am on every platform known to man and woman, because I am on a global mission to empower, to impact, and influence through my words, work, and wisdom. So please reach out. Let's stay connected. I don't believe in the one and done. So hey, let's stay connected. That's the other way to impact and affect change. Thank you again, Kate. I love you to life.
So I want to thank all of you for being here, and those who had to leave early or leave late, for being here and having this discussion today. We do have a comment I want to share with you from someone who's been listening. It says, "Thank you so much for all of the great individuals that contributed to the panel today. Such a necessary topic. Gave me many ideas on how I can move forward as an individual and put something meaningful in action. I hope you can connect with everyone in the group sometime in the future that I haven't already met. Again, thank you all." It's from my son. It says, "Thanks, Mom, for organizing this panel and contributing to inspire change outside of yourself." It just says Facebook user because apparently he didn't register, but thanks, Chris. So, I appreciate you all being here and having this discussion. And I have a quote to share with the listeners to carry with you through your week. That is, "Racism is still with us, but it is up to us to prepare our children for what they have to meet, and hopefully we shall overcome." And that quote was said by Rosa Parks. And so it's still relevant, and we have a lot of work left to do. But I think we're up to it. So thank you all for being here, and thank the listeners. And I'm just going to say bye for now.
I have one more thing to say. I just have one more thing to say. I want to leave everybody with my mantra from my brand, and that is to Do what you never done to get what you never had. And that's what I live by every single day. And I would love it if you guys share that with individuals that you come in contact with. I think it's so important and so powerful. How, if depending on how you look at that, but that's a mantra I live by, and that represents me and my brand and my livelihood. So I wanted to just share that with you.
Thank you. So now we're going to say goodbye. And
Bye, everyone.
to people who might be listening, the regular show is on Tuesdays, 3 p.m. Pacific time. And next Tuesday, I'm going to be interviewing Victoria Marie Gallagher, and we're going to find out how to manifest your soulmate. So join us Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Oh,
Wisdom with Kate Olson. We hope you enjoyed the show. If we made you laugh, brighten your day, or spark.
Okay.